A billionaire's empire teetered on the edge of collapse the moment a maid's 12-year-old daughter dared to speak. Harrison Blackwood, self-proclaimed king of Chicago's skyline, was smiling as his Japanese guest prepared to sign the contract that would cement a $500 million deal, but he hadn't counted on Abigail Riley. Quiet, observant, and just 12 years old, she stood in the corner of the penthouse, a faded backpack clutched to her chest, invisible in the opulence surrounding her, until her eyes caught the Japanese characters on that contract, and something inside her froze. She stepped forward, voice trembling but clear. "That's not what it says." And in that instant, the polished penthouse, the art worth millions, the glass walls reflecting the skyline, everything froze. A single piece of paper, a single observation, could topple an empire. Abigail had come with her mother, Helen, Blackwood's trusted maid, who'd taken a rare Sunday off, only to be pulled into a high-stakes emergency meeting. Helen whispered warnings, her voice barely a breath. "Stay in the kitchen, don't touch anything, don't speak unless spoken to." But Abby's curiosity, and her grandfather's teachings, had brought her closer to the center of danger than anyone anticipated. The elevator doors opened to a penthouse that was less a home and more a monument to wealth, floor-to-ceiling glass walls, furniture that could have been museum pieces, the faint smell of expensive leather and perfume that made Abby's worn jeans feel like a costume. Eleanor Blackwood, Harrison's wife, glided in, perfectly coiffed, eyes like ice. "You're late," she snapped. Her gaze fell on Abby, a flicker of disdain crossing her flawless face. Helen stammered excuses. Eleanor waved them off, assigning Abby the invisible tasks of serving drinks, moving like a ghost in the grand room. Abby's eyes scanned the space, taking in Preston Blackwood lounging on a sleek sofa, smirking and mocking her with every glance. "Crayons," she mumbled when he asked about her backpack, cheeks flushing. Inside, her grandfather's Japanese folktales book waited quietly, a secret lifeline she would soon rely on. The meeting began, a clash of styles. Harrison barked about profits, dominance, deals, while Mr. Kenji Tanaka, the Japanese investor, spoke with measured calm, dignity, a stark contrast to Blackwood's aggression. Preston tried to insert himself, mishandling introductions, flaunting privilege, causing Abby's heart to tighten with each insult. She thought of her grandfather, who had fought in the Pacific, who had taught her about giri, duty, honor, a person's word as sacred. Then came the moment that changed everything. Abby, sent to collect glasses, found herself near the coffee table. Her eyes skimmed the Japanese side of the contract, trained over years by her grandfather. A single paragraph, the meaning clear. This was a trap. Assets would transfer to Blackwood, leaving Mr. Tanaka's companies exposed. She froze, then whispered, almost inaudibly, "That's not what it says." Every head turned. Harrison's face darkened from anger to purple blotch. Eleanor's composure cracked. Preston's smirk faltered. Helen's eyes widened in panic. And Mr. Tanaka, poised and serene, held the pen hovering over the signature line, waiting. Silence stretched thick across the room. "What did you just say?" Harrison roared, stepping toward her. Helen grabbed Abby's arm, whispering desperately, urging retreat. But Abby remembered her grandfather's voice. Honor, the sacred bond of truth. She looked up at Mr. Tanaka and spoke, flawless Japanese flowing naturally, formal, respectful. "I apologize for the interruption." The room went still. The interpreter gaped. Harrison's confusion boiled into rage. Eleanor's icy mask shattered. Preston stared blankly. Mr. Tanaka's eyes glimmered with intrigue and respect, focused entirely on the girl who had just exposed their deceit. The power dynamic shifted instantly. The adults with money and arrogance were now outsiders. Irrelevant. Abby pointed to the precise clause and read it aloud, translating for the stunned English speakers. The contract was a $500 million scam. The silence that followed was heavier than stone, suffocating, the weight of Harrison's crumbling empire pressing down. Harrison bellowed, accusing Abby of lying, attacking her mother, trying to reassert dominance. But Mr. Tanaka's quiet intervention froze him in his tracks. An aide stepped in between Harrison and Abby, a silent warning that his rage would not proceed. The room was a tableau of disgrace, associates shrinking, Eleanor screaming at. Invisible lawyers, Preston slack-jawed, their carefully built world unraveling. Clark, the interpreter, confessed the truth. He had altered the translation for money, betraying trust. Harrison shrieked in fury, firing threats at everyone, but Abby stood firm, a small shield for her mother. Mr. Tanaka then addressed them with calm authority. The deal was off. Honor mattered more than money, and the Blackwoods had none. With a bow of profound respect, he guided Abby and Helen toward the elevator, leaving the once mighty family in ruin, their empire poisoned by arrogance. Outside, a sleek black car awaited. Abby and Helen, for the first time, were invited to step into a world they had always observed from the margins. The ride was silent, serene, a stark contrast to the chaos left behind. Mr. Tanaka spoke gently of Abby's grandfather, Walter Riley, recounting acts of honor and humanity that had rippled through generations. Letters lost, lives saved. Debts repaid not with money, but with integrity and courage. He offered Abby a full scholarship to any university in the world, with provisions for Helen, ensuring they would never need to rely on people like the Blackwoods again. Tears streamed down Helen's face. Relief, disbelief, and a gratitude too deep for words, as Abby grasped the magnitude of what had occurred. The twist of fate, seated by her grandfather's lessons in honor, had rewritten their future. Back in their new apartment, a modest two-bedroom oasis, Abby finally had her own room, sunlight streaming through the window. Dust motes dancing, the weight of old struggles lifting. Helen laughed, cooked again, filled the space with warmth. Abby flourished at school, making friends, exploring interests, her mind alive and unshackled. Her connection with Mr. Tanaka deepened, a friendship forged across continents, bound by honor, respect, and shared history. 1 year later, Abby visited her grandfather's grave, white chrysanthemums in hand. She spoke softly, recounting changes, progress, and lessons learned. She reflected on the Blackwoods, on greed and arrogance, and on the quiet power of truth, honor, and integrity passed down from Walter Riley and Satoru Tanaka. At home, she sat in her blue armchair, a book of Japanese folktales in her lap, watching the city lights twinkle against the night sky. Chicago's frantic ambition seemed distant now. Abby understood that courage, honor, and honesty could outweigh even the greatest fortunes. She, the maid's daughter, was no longer a passive observer. She was the keeper of a legacy, the guardian of values that would guide her life. And her story, just beginning, promised the quiet power of truth to outshine all wealth. If you enjoyed this story, share your thoughts in the comments. Where do you stand on honor versus greed? What would you have done in Abby's shoes? Let us know. Let me pick up right where we left off. Abby had just spoken, and the room had gone silent, the weight of her words settling over everyone like a storm cloud. But the story didn't end there. In fact, that moment was only the beginning. As the tension hung thick, Mr. Tanaka, still focused entirely on Abby, leaned closer, his dark eyes searching hers, not with the curiosity of an adult meeting a child, but with the respect owed to someone who had just revealed the truth when everyone else had chosen deceit. You understand the gravity of what you've just done, don't you? He asked quietly in English, his voice carrying a warmth that belied the authority in his presence. Abby nodded, feeling the weight of generations behind her, the lessons from her grandfather, Walter Riley, now alive in the room. Harrison Blackwood, meanwhile, was flailing. His voice boomed, a mixture of rage and disbelief. You, a child, dare to speak against me? Against this deal? Do you know what you've done? He advanced toward Abby, his broad frame towering. But every step was calculated, every inch a threat. Abby's mother, Helen, instinctively stepped behind her daughter, trembling, her hands gripping Abby's shoulders like an anchor. Before Harrison could raise his hand, one of Mr. Tanaka's aides, a quiet man with a firm presence, moved between them, placing a steady hand on Harrison's chest. He didn't speak, didn't argue, just held him back. The message was clear: you will not go further. Harrison froze, fury battling restraint, but the presence of the delegation and the calm authority of Mr. Tanaka left him powerless for the first time in years. The Japanese investor, still holding the pen above the contract, finally broke the silence. His tone, soft but unwavering, demanded the truth. Abby took a deep breath. Her grandfather's words echoed in her mind. Honor, duty, courage. She pointed to the clause in the Japanese version of the contract and read it aloud. The room fell into absolute silence, each syllable like a hammer, striking the foundations of Blackwood's carefully constructed empire. When she translated it for the English-speaking adults, the weight of her revelation hit like a thunderclap. The deal was a trap, a $500 million scam, masked by legalese and arrogance. Harrison's face went from disbelief to rage to panic. Eleanor's icy composure melted into pure terror. Preston, previously smirking and condescending, was now frozen, unable to find a word. Helen clutched her daughter's hand, pride and fear intertwined, while the rest of the room, associates, investors, interpreters, looked on in stunned disbelief. Clark, the interpreter who had altered the translation for personal gain, crumpled under scrutiny. He admitted, voice shaking, that he had been bribed, that he had falsified the contract, that he had betrayed trust for money. The confession hung in the air like a death knell. Harrison erupted, screaming at everyone, firing threats and curses, but Mr. Tanaka simply gestured for his aides to restore order. The deal is off, he said calmly. This is no longer about money. It is about honor, something you have none of. With that, the Blackwoods' empire began to unravel. In front of everyone's eyes. Their arrogance, their contempt for others, their sense of invincibility, all of it evaporated in the face of truth, courage, and integrity. Harrison's threats and bluster fell flat. Associates fled, unwilling to be caught in the fallout, while Eleanor screamed into her phone, frantically calling lawyers. Preston slumped onto the Italian silk rug, his former confidence evaporated, staring blankly at the skyline as if it were the ruins of his own kingdom. Meanwhile, Abby and Helen were escorted by Mr. Tanaka to the elevator, shielded from the chaos. The ride down was quiet, the hum of the city below replaced by a profound stillness. Once outside, Abby took in the sleek black car waiting for them, the polished leather, the impossibly pristine interior. It was a world she had only glimpsed from the periphery, now offered as a gesture of respect and protection. On the way home, Mr. Tanaka spoke of Abby's grandfather, recounting stories of courage, kindness, and the sacrifices made in war. Stories of humanity transcending hatred, of a bond formed between enemies who became, in the eyes of honor, family. He spoke of letters lost, of debts unpaid, of lives forever intertwined by acts of integrity and compassion. And then, with quiet dignity, he revealed his offer, a full scholarship for Abby to attend any university she chose, living expenses for her mother, and a chance to rebuild their lives far away from the shadows of the Blackwoods. Helen wept, tears of relief, disbelief, and joy streaming down her face. Abby sat quietly, the weight of what had happened sinking in, the lessons of her grandfather alive in her heart. The future she had only dared to imagine, a room of her own, education, safety, was now within reach. The simple act of speaking truth had rewritten their destiny. The following weeks blurred into a new reality. Abby flourished in school, making friends, exploring new passions, her mind alive with curiosity unshackled by fear or poverty. Helen thrived as well, the heavy burden of endless labor replaced by peace and purpose. The Blackwoods Empire, meanwhile, crumbled under the scandal, their reputation in tatters, a cautionary tale of greed and hubris. Abby never forgot that day in the penthouse, the moment when courage and honor overcame power and arrogance. She visited her grandfather's grave, placing flowers, whispering updates about their lives, reflecting on the lessons of humanity, respect, and integrity that had saved them. And as she gazed at the city skyline from her window in their new apartment, she understood something fundamental. True power isn't measured in wealth, it's measured in character. She, the maid's daughter, was no longer an invisible child. She was the keeper of a legacy, the embodiment of honor, and ready for whatever came next. And in that quiet confidence, she knew the world was hers to navigate, not with fear, but with the courage and integrity her grandfather had instilled in her. Where would you have stood if you were in Abby's shoes? What would you have risked to speak? The truth? Share your thoughts below, because sometimes the smallest voices carry the greatest power.